Hello, it's CisVolk. Time to enjoy card making with me. In this video I want to show you the differences between 4 of the most used inks and stamping with solid stamps. Solid stamps have a large solid surface and that can sometimes make it a bit challenging to get a clean impression. I will tell you exactly what you want to know to get beautiful stamped results. These are a high quality photopolymer clear stamp and they have not been used before. For stamping you will need a clear block or a stamping platform. I will take a brand new stamp and I press the stamp firmly so no air bubbles stay under the surface. I'm now using Marianne Design stamping paper. It is fairly smooth paper, great for coloring with pencils and also very suitable for the hot foil machine. But it is not the smoothest paper, so it is perfect for this demonstration. I start to apply Memento ink onto the brand new stamp. Memento ink is a water-based ink, also known as a dye ink. This ink is easy to remove from clothing and is very good to use when you want to color with pencils or with alcohol markers. When I apply the ink, you can already see what happens. The ink does not want to cling well to the stamp. No matter how often I apply the ink, you still see lighter spots on the surface, and that is not what we want. The ink does not attach well on a new stamp. I give it a try, however, to show you what happens. The impression is very dark, but not evenly stamped everywhere. Let's fix this problem. Before stamping, you will have to condition your stamp. Every new stamp has a layer on top that we call resin. This layer makes it difficult for some inks, especially water-based inks, to attach to the stamp surface. That is why we need to condition the stamp first. This top resin layer has to be rubbed off. You can do this in different ways. You can wipe it with a microfiber cloth or simply rub it with your finger. You can also use an eraser, as long as the very top layer is removed a little bit. Be gentle. You do not need to rub a lot. I clean the stamp again and dry it. Because the surface is now slightly rougher, the ink will attach better. I will ink the stamp up again with Memento Tuxedo Black Dye ink. When I stamp this, I keep the stamp pressed on the paper a bit longer on purpose. By holding the stamp on the paper for a moment, you give the ink time to soak into the paper. Always do that with water-based ink. However, I let the ink soak into the paper and I did condition the stamp. You can see that this is still not the result we want. Dye ink is more sensitive. The ink pad can also be dried out and sometimes you need to repeat the process once more for the best result. If it still doesn't work, you will need smoother paper. Also, stamping a third time did not make it improve. But I think with this paper it will not get better than this. On smoother paper made for alcohol marker coloring, you can get a very even impression. I will show that at the end of the video. Now I continue with another new stamp, number 8, which I haven't used before. New from the package, nice and clear and very sticky. I will stamp with VaessenCreative ink, my absolute favorite ink. And you will see why that is. You do not always have to wipe the stamp before use. However, you can rub it to be sure. You can use VaessenCreative ink when you color with water-based inks or with pencils. The disadvantage of this ink is that it does not wash out of clothing easily. And it needs a bit longer to dry. Although I also find that an advantage, because you can heat emboss it beautifully. Sometimes it stamps perfectly the first time, but with a solid stamp that is not always the case. However, when you apply a second layer of ink, you get a very sharp and even impression. Here I keep the stamp on the paper for about 2 seconds. And now we have a perfect impression without having to condition the stamp. The color of VaessenCreative is also a deeper black than the Memento ink, which is a bit more grey. Because VersaFine ink has an oil base, it is sticky and it clings well enough to the stamp to create a sharp impression. These CarlaCreates by VaessenCreative photopolymer stamps are very sticky and they stay very sticky. They are of very good quality. Some lower quality stamps are hard to remove from the mica sheet, but they fall off very easily when you place them back. That is no issue with CarlaCreates stamps. And VersaFine ink works for all kinds of stamps. I cleaned the stamps with water and placed them back on the mica sheet. You can now clearly see that I used the 5 and the 9 with Memento ink. They are stained. I also used the 8 and cleaned it, but you see no trace of it. I like that my stamps stay beautiful with VersaFine ink. Now I will stamp the 0. This one has also not been used yet. This time I use archival ink. This is also a permanent ink. You can color over it with any medium. The ink dries quite quickly, but you can heat emboss it. I will first make an impression without conditioning the stamp. You can see that the impression is difficult to make on this paper, which is smooth, but not super smooth. The color black is also a bit more blue toned than VersaFine. VersaFine is true black, while Memento is more grey black. Archival ink also takes on the color of the medium you place on top of it. Ask CarlaCreates about this. She's a big fan of this ink. She uses the grey archival ink and colors her images with distress ink for a no-line coloring effect. I now wipe the stamp clean with a microfiber cloth with water, and you can see how the ink has already soaked into the stamp. The stamp keeps this purple color, unfortunately. I find that a pity, but it has no effect on the quality of the stamp. With a stamp cleaner you can remove the ink if you want. I go over it with an eraser and clean it again with a cloth and water. I cannot get the stamp completely clean, as you can see. Now I will stamp it again and see if the impression is smooth this time. By trying to clean and rubbing the stamp, I did condition it, so that cannot be an issue anymore. If you don't like to take the risk of making stamp errors, you can also stamp using a stamping platform. By using that you can stamp twice on the same spot. You can see how firmly the stamp sticks to the paper with this ink. I expected the impression to be better this time, but unfortunately it has the same effect as with the Memento ink. I will try once more. Apply a good amount of ink. Place the stamp straight down, hold it for a moment and lift it straight up. Now unfortunately it must be the paper. I never get such beautiful impressions with archival ink as I get with VersaFine. And my VersaFine, which I have had for 4 years and used very often and never refilled, still gives the best results on every type of paper. So that is it. Finally, I will also stamp with VersaMark ink. This is an ink that is perfect for heat embossing with embossing powder, or for stamping on colored paper to create a watermarked effect. You have VersaMark ink in a small pad or a large pad. My small VersaMark pad is still clean, just as it should be when you buy it in the store. My large VersaMark pad is already a few years old and completely stained, because ink or paint has transferred onto it. It has no effect on the stamped result. You can refill it with a refiller and it will stamp just as beautifully. Only the ink pad doesn't look nice anymore. One advantage of VersaMark ink is that you do not need to condition the stamp before you start stamping. It is a sticky ink and it sticks very well to smooth surfaces. When you stamp with this ink you can hardly see anything, because it is a transparent ink. But when you sprinkle embossing powder on top, you will see that it clings beautifully. The embossing powder attaches everywhere to the ink. When I heat it with a heat tool, the embossing powder melts and you can see how even and sharp the impression is. Another advantage of VersaMark ink is that when you stamp with it, you do not necessarily need to clean the stamp completely. The next ink you stamp with it will still cling very well, and that means that VaessenMark ink also counts as a conditioner for solid stamps. Now a quick summary of what I've shown you, and then I stamp the inks once more on smoother paper. The Memento ink is stamped with the number 5. The VaessenFine ink is stamped with the number 8. The Archival ink is stamped with the number 0. And the VaessenMark ink is stamped and heat embossed with the number 4. Now that I stamped with all 4 inks on the Marianne design stamping paper, I really want to get a clean impression with the number 5. And I expect that the paper is the reason it didn't work earlier. Here I have smooth white DCP printer paper. You can stamp beautifully on this with every kind of ink. Stamping on this smooth paper is easier. I already used the Memento ink 3 times with the number 5 and I will try it again on this DCP paper. You can see immediately that now, after multiple times, the stamp is conditioned and the ink clings much better to the surface. Again I hold the stamp on the paper for a moment so the ink can transfer well, and now I get a very sharp impression. So you see, it is all about using a stamp that is good quality and conditioned before using it, and it is about using the right paper as well. Of course I want to check that with the other inks too. Again I clean the stamp with just water and the microfiber cloth. Now I stamp with VaessenFine ink, my favorite ink, because of the intense black color and because it always stamps crisp and clean on so many different papers, as you can see. Let us now use that same stamp with Archival ink. Again I clean the stamp with water and the microfiber cloth just like before. I apply the Archival ink. Always press the ink pad on the stamp and not the other way around. It has a few advantages. You will have far less risk of getting ink on your fingers and you can tap lightly instead of pressing too hard, which can cause blotches on small stamped lines. It also helps you to close the lid immediately after inking, which prevents your ink pads from drying out. This bad impression is a surprise. I did not expect this. Maybe the stamp was still damp after cleaning. Let us try again. Now cleaned with a dry microfiber cloth. I stamp in the same way, pressing evenly and firmly. You can see how strongly the stamp clings to the paper with this ink. You have to pull it down to release it. Look, now we have a nice impression. I guess the stamp was slightly damp before I applied the Archival ink. That is normally not a problem at all for VaessenFine ink. Now you see 3 nicely stamped number 5 impressions. On top the Memento dye ink, second the VaessenFine Onyx Black permanent ink, and last the Archival permanent black ink. I hope that this video helps you in choosing which ink suits you best. Ask any questions you have. I am very willing to help you. Shop links are below in the description under the video. There are affiliate links included, so when you accept cookies, I receive a small commission on the products you purchase. View more inspiration and fun tutorial videos on my YouTube channel, CisVolk. Enjoy card making, and I hope to see you again next time. Bye bye!